Well, just while people are joining, give us a minute just to say hello. I'm Simon. I'm hosting this session. Lovely to see you all. I'm in Northern Scotland, Finton, for this at the moment. So it's like a great segue for me. Thank you all. Lovely to see you here. This really came about from three very strong pieces. What we were going to do for the hour is framing a little bit of where this came out of for everybody. Then there's stepping into an experience around it, because we also are capable of being in places when we are experiencing our higher natures or highest natures or peak nature, as the description for this session put it. And it's really useful. Then the third part of it, just the takeouts from today and some ways of playing with this over the next couple of weeks before we can reconvene again and distill the wisdom out of it too. I have 3 slides to frame this, and let me share the slides to everybody to give it a little bit more context. Welcome to Peak Nature. This is a 3-part Limicon session. So obviously we're in today, and this is to put the structure around it, where this came from, and to practice a little bit of it too. See what it's like when we step into these peak nature experiences. The second part of it is anytime, as little or as much as you desire, go and try it during the next 2 weeks. There's a guided video. It's 8 minutes long. It has a little bit to do, about a minute to do in your home or in a room, and then it suggests you go out on a walk. I'll talk a little bit more to that at the end of it. And then come back an hour later than today, same Zoom link on the 22nd of March, and we'll share and distill the wisdom from this. With these experiences, there's always a desire and a need to put frameworks around it to understand what we're feeling, to step into this with our multiple intelligences and then make sense of it. That's what the third session is aimed at. How do we integrate this? How do we put words to it? How do we describe it to others? How do we share it? How do we help everybody scaffold this? So 3 sessions. The first place this came out is a 3-year international process of been involved in, and it's called, it's for short, the long version of that is the Intergovernmental Panel on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services. Yes, only the UN could have thought of a name like that. And it's roughly equivalent to the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. What it did was, in these 3 years, is say, we know what we need to do around biodiversity, around our world, around meeting the meta crisis in effect. And what we're really missing out on here is, how do we do it? How do we actually make these changes? How do we create the types of transformations that we all know are really both imperative to do and very much in everybody's interest to create, to enhance, to shift into, to ground our world and to ensure that we have soft landings, the conditions for thriving for all species, for a flourishing life, for all sentient beings to have lives worth living. The gap, and often is the gap, in these large scientific processes, and it became a piece called the Transformations Report. The actual title of this report is about 20 words long, but it's the Transformations Report, where we as an author on it, and we went and looked at what's the science for transformation. What do we know about how society and humans transform to meet crisis, to change the conditions around us, to care for the commons, to care for ourselves, to alter spaces so that we are meeting needs? The part of that I was particularly involved with was chapter 5 of this report, which is on the inner dimensions of this change. What do we know about the ways that we make sense of the world around us, our mindsets, and the ways that we understand ourselves and the world around us? And what do we know about the spaces once we step into them in terms of cultures and how this is shifting the cultures? That's what we principally did. The set of findings that came out of this, I'd say, are groundbreaking. Usually what governments do is they work from a space of order and skill. They're rules-based organizations. That's the safety that governments often, or traditionally, been challenged these days, but have traditionally sought out to bring. We want to look at something and look at how we could legislate or create a policy around it, or a set of rules so that we can answer the types of conditions that are around us. Biodiversity, for example, we creates National Parks and Wildlife Service or National Park Service. We protect areas, we pass legislation that protect areas. It's the rules-based approach, and it's valuable. What's occurring here, however, which is why I say is groundbreaking, is that the governments were able to recognize the value of going beyond that framework, taking a paradigm step beyond that framework in shifting it so that they were looking at this from a space of, well, what happens if we're curious about our own ethics? What happens if we start to get vulnerable? What happens if we start to allow ourselves to explore this area in detail? The reality of this is that it was able to be held there. We had science, which had gone through a peer review process and a long process of saying, is this valid? Can we justify this? Can we say that these are some of the essential components that will help create the transformation that meets, in this case, the vision for biodiversity in the world in 2050? And given what all of the science says, how does this get summarized? What you're looking at on the screen is some quotes from how these UN processes work when everybody gets together and they create a thing called the summary for policymakers, a more accessible point of these documents. The quotes online on the screen have come directly out of the summary for policymakers. And this is a document that was line edited in Namibia in December over 5 days by all of the governments present. The fact that they are able to say that's fundamental to this is spiritually reconnecting humans and nature, that we change through collective imagining, that we are integrated and co-evolving with the world around us, and that we're fully interdependent with nature is radical. It's a very strong step away from this significant rules, order, and skills-based framework. You can't really legislate for integrated and co-evolving. So it takes governments to be able to say we can be vulnerable in the space, we can take ourselves into the space, is a really significant affirmation of the power that can be here, of the depth that can be here, of the realities that are here. Overall, what this transformations report does for me and for many of the people around us is it lowers the barriers for talking about this. As it says, humans are spiritually connected with nature, not the usual language we'd find for governance. So that's part one of why I say this is extraordinary. Part two is to bust something that I would have said is my bias, which is that we sometimes have deeply interconnected, profound at-one-ment experiences. We feel that we are in a space of tiredness. We sense into the interconnectedness. I feel and I can sense that I am you in an interaction or a particular peak experience. These peak experiences tend to sometimes be thought of as, alternative, anomalous experiences. I'm suggesting here, actually, they're just our enhanced awareness. And when we go and look at the evidence for this, we find that something between 40 to 60% of people have been experiencing an awakening at some degree of intensity, at various degrees of intensity. That's huge. That's an immense number of people and an immense proportion of our human population. It's also validated by the times that we go and ask for this. Are people here familiar with these types of adult development frameworks, how we grow and how we can take bigger and bigger perspectives as our awareness increases? It's common in some of these fields. Can you just get a show of hands if people are familiar with some of those frameworks? Thank you. So the broad piece behind this, if you're not, is that when we're children, we change our mindsets. Initially, as a kid, for example, it's all about me. We see nothing else except ourselves. And then at some stage, our view shifts. And we realize that we're separate from the people around us. We have our own unique identity. Everything around us is not just us. That's a paradigm shift. That's a mind shift, set shift. Those shifts can continue for us throughout our lives. Space that is going on here is that we step into these mindset shifts and we become gradually more and more self-aware, autonomous. We go past looking for a rules-based order, for example, and we start to step into the place of we want to be loved for who we are and love ourselves for who we are. We start looking for self-transforming structures, and those structures can keep going and do keep going for people. We experience ourselves from our highest states and highest states. When you ask people about their highest states on this framework, you hear developmental experiences where people are coming from the cosmic, where people are coming from the unity, where people are coming from the form. People will commonly talk about these states in connection. It might have happened during meditation, during intimate summer connection, a experience of childbirth, all sorts of things. But universally, people will talk about also an experience of being in nature, an experience of being in the old growth forest, or walking up a mountain or a hill and seeing the sunrise and the whole vista spread out around them and beyond them, or stepping into a sense of communion with the trees or the species in a particular beautiful garden experience or during exercise. That says that this is the second extraordinary plank of this. This is something that we often set aside as an alternative reality. And it's actually quite common. It's actually quite usual for people to see this and to experience this. As we start to explore it, we can value and validate those peak experiences. What's likely to happen with the old neuroplasticity analogy is what fires together, wires together. As we explore, the more we explore this, the more we start to recognize it, see it in ourselves, and remember the times it's happened for us more and more commonly. So part two of the extraordinary. And part three of the extraordinary is that the area of repair, regeneration, recovery, and remembering is the most vibrant area I know of around sustainability and around meeting our world's needs in sustainability. Most of my life in various different frames in organizational change and helping people as a coach and all sorts of climate coaching and consciousness work, leadership work around this. And universally, when it comes to something that actually involves getting our hands dirty or actually involves creating a physical change, such as rewilding, such as returning a habitat back to, or helping return a habitat back to its natural state, or shifting something so that we can generate a water cycle in an area, it attracts so much more passion than anything else. So that's the third part of the extraordinary, the passion, the reality that when we put together that external connection with the internal connection, we have more activity and energy. And that passion is some of what I believe sat behind this original piece of there's the Intergovernmental Panel on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, being able to produce such extraordinary groundbreaking results with 147 governments in the UN who would normally not have let us publish something that they say, we agree, spiritually reconnecting humans and nature is vital and important. That's the background. Thank you for listening in. And if anybody has any quick questions, now's a good time for them. Otherwise, I suggest we go and try this as an experience for ourselves as well, which I goes to lead. Anybody wanting to jump in with any quick questions on?
Just to be clear, what was the first part you mentioned?
BES, which is IPBES,
that was the first part.
Intergovernmental
Okay.
Panel on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services. And yes, I worked on it for 3 years in the background, not full time, like very much occasional piece of work. And it took me about 3 years to be able to pronounce it and to remember the acronyms. Thank you for asking. If everybody's comfortable, let me suggest you find it, or settle yourself in a comfortable space. And I'm going to lead you on a integration with a bit of music playing in the background. Find yourself resting against your seat. You may like to close your outer eyes. You may like to relax your body and settle into the space around you. And I want to take you to the Alps in Europe. Specifically, I want to take you to the Julian Alps in Europe, a really stunning part of this continent of Europe, totally unexpected for me. And they're on the kind of like corner triangle where Italy meets Austria, meets Slovenia. And as you go into the Julian Alps, what you'll find is one of the most remote, surprising areas of a place which you expect to be fully developed, fully human inhabited, and rather it's not. You climb up through the hills, you reach the cliff faces and the rock faces, you go up over the Via Ferrata, which is a metal safety rail put on a climb so that many people can climb up the mountains. And you reach some beautiful peaks and mountain vistas. Then, after spending the night, you've got a choice. There's many places you can go from these places with this choice. And the choice that you're going to take today is to go back down into the forest line. And taking this choice as the heat has just started to come in. The European heat wave has just arrived this year, and it really is kind of super warm around you. And so you're walking down in the early morning until you're reaching the tree line. And on entering the tree line, the sun is getting higher in the sky. The temperature is starting to build. And you're feeling that on your skin as you're walking and enjoying the shade of the trees around you. And what you start to do is you start to feel into the experience of the nature around you as well. In fact, you say to yourself, as your eyes alight on the tree in front of you, as you're walking down the path, this is consciousness. And as you notice that you're walking quite briskly along the path, not slowly as the temperature is building, that you're noticing that this is consciousness feels like it's connected, feels like it is a web between these trees that are a canopy over you, and that the consciousness of the experience around you feels like it is mirroring the heat of the day, the intensity of the sun of the day, the age of the trees, the slowness that they are feeling as they're closing themselves up a little bit, just to steward their energy, to steward themselves, to steward their water and their aliveness, kind of just taking it slow and easy. There's no need to be fast on a hot day like this. The desire on a hot day like this is to rest into being supported by all of the tendrils of roots into the ground beneath your feet. And you can feel the trees extending into that, standing up into the air and closing their paws down a little bit to sustain their energy from the coolness of the morning through the sun that is gradually appearing and the heat that is gradually building around them. And that connected slowness is starting to permeate and feel anew. You can feel the consciousness of the exchange between the trees and the spaces around you as you're stepping down the steep trail, as you're stepping over roots across the trail, as the collective consciousness permeates into you and through you, and you feel it until you suddenly arrive in this almost little clearing where a tree has come down in the past. And where the tree has come down, these little saplings are coming up instead. These small, thin aspens, this youthful energy in the sunlight shaft that's piercing through the clearing. And this youthful energy consciousness is just like, whoa, let's go, buddy, here. We've got the water here. We can almost hear and feel where the stream is here. We can step into that. Yeah. We're not stopping for this. There's the light, there's the sun. Let's reach in and be supported by everything around us. But we have the energy here. We have the youthful vitality. We have the sparkle and the effervescence of the water that we can feel running in the soil beneath us. We can reach that. We can generate with that. We can co-create with that into an aliveness, and you feel that aliveness coming into your body. You feel that consciousness coming into your body. You feel that sense of oneness, that allness, that trinity of, yeah, we've already chosen to be whole here. We've already chosen to be connected and to fill this hole here, present. The life forces, the contradictory life forces, the space that is energy, it comes with you as you lift up your pace, as you leave that little clearing, as you leave the useful saplings, as those saplings are growing in the space around you and behind you and propelling energy into you, holding you. As you start to break into a jog down the trail, as you start to gain confidence even in the heat, with the joy of the growth that is there, of the revitalization and regeneration that is there. It comes with you. It comes with you into remembering of that across your own time and across your own timelines. It comes with you as you descend through the forest and into the glades and into the openness where the water breaks out of the soil and into the river around you, and the heat of the day extends all around you. And as you go to your rooms here, to the spaces around you, into the life that is so inherent within our world and so present and tactile and sparkling when we touch into these experiences of oneness. And so I invite back into our virtual room here, and to wiggle your toes as you return and move your bodies a little bit, and come back with me to our virtual forest with all of the interconnections that are here between us and with us. And thank you for coming on that small journey. I'm going to stop the recording here so people can share without being recorded.